Hi, and thank you for joining me for another lecture. And friends, today I wanted to bounce a concept off of you regarding the laws of Noah. First of all, when dealing with anything regarding law in the religious world, we first have to ask, where does it originate from? So we can then know to what degree are we bound to practice it. And friends, regarding the laws of the children of Noah, there is also no exception. First, where did they originate from? From the Torah or from the court? In other words, from the rabbis. And friends, anyone familiar with the Torah's narrative knows that it mentions no laws or 7 laws that were given to Noah or his children. None, which is the first indicator that they were created by the court. Now, within the Torah, we do find the laws or the concepts that appear within the laws of Noah scattered throughout it, but it never appears as a solid codified body of laws for individuals outside of the covenant who are trying to please the Creator to adhere to. Now, we also do know that the Almighty must have had some ethical standard to judge pre-Sinai humanity against, mainly because He did judge them, like Sodom and Gomorrah, the flood, etc. But a set of laws were never given. Now, one could assume that at least from a biblical analysis, the Almighty's ethical standards for ethics are universal, i.e., expected to be adhered to by every man and not just some future tribe. So then, if you don't come to this conclusion, you'll end up asking yourself, how could He then punish humanity before an ultimate law was actually given, which would make us conclude that in the Almighty's opinion, ethics, and thus the conclusion of what's ethical, is not only logical, but expected to be adhered to by all men. Now, someone could then say that after the court developed the notion of the 7 laws from a judicial perspective, the notion of the 7 laws then attained an allegorical status amongst the Jewish people, which is what God may have used in Bereshit and half of Shemot to judge pre-Sinai by. Fine, but my friends, it makes no mention of any laws being given, and in other words, it does not in any way make this idea a theologically definitive concept. Now, like we said, what we do know for a fact is that these laws were used by the court to adjudicate non-Jews living in the land. How they came into existence is really what's in question here. As a matter of fact, there are a few places by Chazal that it is taught that they were even abolished by the Almighty. Some say as early as even before Avram Avinu. However, that did not change the fact that the court used these laws to judge Gentiles living in Jewish lands. So, what we're doing is separating factual halakha from midrashic folklore and ultimately opinion. So, at least from a hashkafic perspective, all one is required to believe regarding the 7 laws is that it was the laws, like we said, used by the Sanhedrin to adjudicate non-Jews. And everything regarding how they came into existence must be assumed. I mean, we must assume that the court just created them. And not just because these laws don't appear in Torah, but mainly because the court does not establish metaphysical reality from an authoritative perspective, but just practical halakha. Now, the Rambam writes in Moreh Nevuchim that the only revelation that the world ever received from the Creator was Matan Torah. Now, I'm not referencing the Rambam here as some hashkafic authority. Rather, he's just laying down a basic principle found in Judaism and in Torah. However, we also see in many other places that the Rambam does not abandon folklore and actually mention that these laws were given to Adam and the final law given to Noah, which should, as a reflex, put the Jewish halachic mind into gear immediately, making that distinction between what's halachic and, again, what's only folklore. Now, these statements are predominantly only found in the Mishnah Torah, at least by the Rambam, which, as you already know, is a compilation of all Jewish laws. And not just Jewish laws, but he also contained or included many midrashic and agadic ideas that he deemed necessary to mention because they were in some way traditionally tied into a specific set of halachot. And this is why we see him have a different attitude and even a different understanding in the Guide for the Perplexed in Moreh Nevuchim, where the majority of his personal opinions are revealed or displayed. So friends, ultimately what I'm saying is that according to what a Jew is commanded and expected to believe, we have no source outside of Midrashim and Agadot that non-Jews are expected to keep 7 laws to please the Creator. Now this appears nowhere that we consider authoritative. Now, the halakha does mention the keeping of the 7 laws in a court legal setting. And this is part of our halakha, that this is how we judge them against, how we judge non-Jews against. And not just these laws, but rather a subset of each of these laws. But in terms of celestial endorsement, this exists only in folklore. Now, can one assume that because the court institutes a law, non-Jews are expected to adhere to it blindly? Absolutely not. In other words, non-Jews were never bound by the mitzvah of lo tasor or lo sasor, of not straying from the rulings of the court. In other words, the only reason Jews are even expected to listen to and adhere to the rulings of the court, even today, i.e. the instructions of the rabbis, of the Talmudic rabbis, is only because the Torah commanded us to. In Parashat Shoftim and many other parashiot. So if a Jew takes upon himself Torah, which I believe a Jew is expected to do on his own in his lifetime, and not assume that his ancestors did it for him, which I might add is also a midrashic opinion, and actually makes no sense that your ancestor could decide your religious status for you and your line for the rest of humanity, or for the rest of eternity, a concept that, again, does not appear in Torah. However, when he or she does personally accept Torah, he or she then must adhere to the instructions laid down by Chazal. However, non-Jews are exempt from adhering to the instructions of the sages, and historically only did adhere to them when they resided in Jewish lands, and thus were under the rule of Jewish courts. And if you want to understand the idea the way it's typically taught today, with the idea of Na'aseh v'nishma, when the Jews said that they will do and then they will listen, non-Jews never did this. Non-Jews never accepted the Torah upon themselves, and non-Jews never bound themselves to the rule of the court. Now, this is just something more to think about when you hear a Jew say that a non-Jew must only keep 7 laws in order to please the Almighty, and a Jew keep 613. I mean, honestly, did that assessment ever really make sense to you? 613 and then just 7? And friends, in life you will realize that most of the time things either confirm the obvious or they are wrong, as it is with this case. So, non-Jews not living under the Sanhedrin's control, if they want a serious religious pursuit from a Torah perspective, which is our only infallible source, they must embrace full Torah Judaism. For more information on everything Jewish, please visit bejewish.org. Thank you.